Oh, it's a baby. Look at that handsome boy. Yes, I love you. Yes, I do. Hey fam, Happy New Year. Happy 2023. I hope it's amazing for you guys. Before we get into today's topic, which obviously, if you read the title, is about theme and finding your story's theme, um, quick disclaimer. If you have not seen my first video, my authortube newbie tag, I am currently writing the first book that I've ever written with the intent of publishing. I have been writing for a very long time, almost as long as I've been reading, but yeah, I'm not like published or anything like that. So this is just my personal opinion from my personal experience. I'm not trying to get on here and act like I have some superior knowledge. Um, but just like any art form, writing is going to be subjective for every person, right? Like, you're going to have to find your own way of going about things. And so I'm just sharing my opinion and what's worked for me. Because for about the last 5 years, I've been very seriously studying the art of storytelling, and that covers a lot of different topics that I eventually will be making videos on and sharing, again, just my opinions and what has worked or hasn't worked for me. But you're going to have to find your own thing. The reason that I wanted to make this video is because in the last 5 years, aside from taking a few classes here and there and doing my own research or reading books or whatever, I have been on authortube and following various people and their own journeys. And one bit of advice that I came across a lot, or have come across a lot, is people talking about finding your theme and crafting a story around a theme or themes that are important to you. And I tried doing this for literally years and got really nowhere. World building, like, again, if you've seen my first video, like, I'm a huge fan of fantasy, especially any type of fantasy for the most part, but especially epic fantasy. I love world building. I love literally starting from scratch and creating all of it. And so that always came naturally to me. Creating the actual story was always difficult. I always knew there's certain things that I wanted to discuss in anything that I wrote, because that's why I love fantasy. One of the biggest reasons I love it is being able to express personal perspectives and opinions about the state of the world or about our real world without being offensive or triggering to people, hopefully. Because, people get defensive if you just come right at them and say, well, I think this. People can get defensive if they disagree with you. But if you tell it through a story, through a character's perspective, it doesn't come across as a personal attack. People don't have that defensiveness, and I feel like fantasy can really make people think about things in ways that they maybe haven't before. And so, obviously, theme has been a big deal for me when it comes to crafting my stories. That being said, all these videos that I've come across, and again, I'm not knocking anybody, I am not a professional, I am just sharing what has and has not worked for me. So, whatever works for you. But I've come across so many videos that talk about other authors talking about finding your theme before you even really know your story. And maybe that works for some people. I literally tried that for years and got nowhere. I got nothing done. And so about a year ago, I sat down and I thought, I've been taking this class, and it was a creative writing kind of aspect of the class where I was basically having to do a retelling, write my own retelling of certain myths, or even just make up my own myths, basically picking a different god or goddess from wherever in the world, whatever time period, and retelling one of their myths, or just making one up if I couldn't find one, from the perspective of that god or goddess. And that was a really cool thing, and it really got me back into just writing in general, because I didn't have to come up with my own story necessarily most of the time. I was just doing retellings. And so I really, I got back into the, okay, I still want to tell my own story though. And I was really feeling burnt out because for literally, like I said, years, had been trying to craft a story around a theme and not getting anywhere. And so I sat down and I thought, what did I used to do years ago? Again, when I was most prolific at my writing when I was in high school. Yeah, maybe I had more time to write in high school, but that aside, what was I doing that I could just sit there for hours a day and just write, and just have it flow out of me? Because I didn't used to write outlines. I would just write down whatever image. I would see movies in my head and write them down, and I think that's where a lot of people probably start, to be honest. You just want to have an adventure. So, um, what I realized is that I was just writing things that were exciting to me, or writing about things that were interesting, or just having a good time. And so I sat down and I was like, okay, well, what sounds like a fun story to me? And so I started brainstorming that, and I've had an idea. The story that I'm working on right now has been gradually evolving. The world itself, the characters, everything have been evolving for several years now, probably close to a decade. And I just couldn't solidify anything. And so I just let everything go. And of course, those things still came back up because they've been brewing for a while. But I just decided to have fun with it. And so I sat down and I was like, okay, well, obviously my favorite genre is fantasy. I really love history, so I want to take inspiration from real history. And over the last year, yes, I've gotten some writing done. I've gotten a lot of world building done. It's to the point now where I basically live in my other world as often as I live in the worlds of other people who, I'm a fan of their work. So it's a little different because I'm creating it, but I'm so familiar with it at this point that it has that familiarity to it, if that makes sense. But it has definitely evolved over time, but I've gotten so much more done, and at this point it is solidified and I'm actually writing it. And yeah, it's still taking a while. It's my first book and I want it to be really good, and the process has been interesting. But what I realized is that as I let go and just started writing for fun, just for fun, as I looked at the outline that I was creating, despite all of the evolutions that it's gone through, there are massive themes that are extremely important to me, that are my own perspectives about the world we live in, that are things that confuse me or hurt me, or just make me curious, make me interested, like whatever it is, right? These things, and maybe it's not specific themes. Like, I feel every story has different themes to it, right? You don't have to cram everything that's important to you into one story. And I'm just throwing that out there now because that was one thing that I used to try to do also. So if you're trying to do that, don't, I mean, do what you want, but also don't do that. I would not recommend it. It's going to get way too cramped and you're going to try to squeeze way too much into there. But at least that's what I did. But if you just let go, write for fun, and then see what themes pop up, like they just start coming up naturally. And if you try, at least in my experience, when I tried writing around a theme, it started feeling really forced, and it felt like way too in someone's face. And what I was saying before about, my love of fantasy, because it doesn't make people defensive. It could make people think about things differently, just in a non triggering kind of way, right? Hopefully, in some cases at least. And that wasn't going to be possible if it felt like I was forcing a theme into my story, or forcing a story around a theme, whatever, right? And so, just my best advice with all of this is just, if you're struggling in this area like I was for so long, just sit back and think, what would be an interesting story for me to tell? What is fascinating to me? And go from there. And then as you start outlining, or whatever your process is, if you're a pantser and you just want to write, just start writing. And you'll see things that are important to you will just start popping up naturally, because that is the nature of art, right? Like, I am part of a huge community of artists, and whatever the art form is, I don't know any of them that sit there and think, like, in such a it's not something you sit back and think about so like strictly and like rigidly in this box. You can't put creativity in a box. You just have to go with what feels like some like whatever your truth is that needs to come out will come out in your story. It doesn't matter how crazy of a story it is, it will come out. Again, in my experience, everyone's different. But yeah, I just wanted to throw this out there because that was one of the biggest challenges for me even getting started in this process. And so I figured it'd be a good place for me to start making my actual authortube videos. If you're new here, I am also new here. Please like and subscribe. It takes 5 seconds and it really helps a girl out. Also, if you want more content like this, because I do plan on talking a lot more about this stuff and sharing more about my own personal journey, and I would love to hear about y'all's journey too. So thank you so much for being here. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see y'all real soon. Peace out.